harmony, a ship humming with diversity, the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Week commenced with a spectacle of colors and sounds. Alien ambassadors from across the cosmos, each adorned in their unique regalia, mingled in the grand hall, designed to mimic the tranquil expanse of space. Captain Lisa Nguyen, a sprightly human with a knack for disarming humor, stepped onto the podium, her voice amplifying through the chamber. Welcome, esteemed guests, to a week where we celebrate not just the cultures that divide us, but the curiosity that unites us, she declared, her eyes twinkling with excitement. Among the crowd, Zorblatt, the Gliese ambassador, towered over most. His 4 eyes, each blinking in asynchronous harmony, scanned the room skeptically. He leaned toward his neighbor, a nimble Eurythian, whispering humans and their quaint practices. Yoga, is it? Stretching and breathing as an art form? The murmurs grew as Lisa continued. This week, we'll bend more than just the rules of gravity. Let's stretch our minds and bodies with some human yoga. Scattered laughter and intrigued murmurs filled the air, but Zorblatt scoffed audibly. Captain Nguyen, Zorblatt called out, his voice booming over the chatter. Might this yoga be too terrestrial for such a cosmic congregation? Lisa's smile broadened. Ah, Ambassador Zorblatt, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the superiority of Gliese flexibility? She teased, inviting him to the stage with a playful gesture. As Zorblatt stepped up, his movements stiff yet dignified, the room hushed in anticipation. The challenge was not just a test of flexibility, but a symbolic duel of cultural pride, setting the stage for a week where human ingenuity would, once again, attempt to bridge the vastness of interstellar divides. As the murmurs of anticipation from the assorted assembly filled the grand hall of the Harmony, Captain Lisa Nguyen ushered the crowd to form a wide circle. At its center, she unrolled a standard-issue yoga mat with a ceremonious flourish. Let's begin with something simple, she announced, stepping onto the mat with the poise of a seasoned instructor. Zorblatt, looming large beside her, his scales shimmering under the hall's lights, watched with a blend of curiosity and condescension. Around them, other ambassadors, from the feathered Seraphians to the gelatinous Bloops, leaned in closer, their varied eyes wide with intrigue. First, the mountain pose, Lisa began, standing straight with her arms at her sides. Demonstrating, she breathed in deeply, her chest rising and falling rhythmically. It's about foundation and stability, something we all need, no matter our planet. Zorblatt snorted, a sound that rumbled like distant thunder. Stability? Looks more like standing still to me, he remarked dryly, eliciting chuckles from some of the more skeptical onlookers. Undeterred, Lisa transitioned into the tree pose, lifting one foot and pressing it against her opposite thigh, her arms reaching skyward. Balance, she explained, is not just physical. It's about harmonizing our internal landscapes with our external environments. The audience murmured appreciatively, but Zorblatt, feeling the stir of challenge, stepped forward. Allow me, he said, attempting the pose. His first try was wobbly, his large feet ill-suited to mimic human dexterity. On his second attempt, however, he managed a semblance of stability, drawing surprised applause from the crowd. Encouraged by this, other ambassadors joined in. A Seraphian, with its multiple limber limbs, twisted into an elaborate version of the pose, while a Bloop, despite its fluid form, managed a wobbly approximation. Excellent! Lisa clapped her hands, her voice encouraging. Now, let's raise the stakes with the warrior pose. She demonstrated, stepping one foot back and bending her front knee, her arms extended out in a strong line. The participants mirrored her, each according to their physical capabilities, creating a tableau of fierce warriors of peace from across the galaxies. Laughter and light-hearted banter filled the hall as each tried to outdo the others, not just in flexibility, but in flamboyance. But the light mood shifted subtly as Zorblatt, growing more competitive, accessed his data pad for a more complex pose. The galactic pretzel, he announced, with a booming confidence that echoed off the metallic walls. "Let's see the limits of human flexibility." Lisa hesitated, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "That's quite advanced," she warned. But Zorblatt was already twisting his body into the intricate pose, his limbs weaving around each other in a complex lattice. One by one, spurred by Zorblatt's daring, other ambassadors attempted the pose. The hall transformed into a bizarre forest of contorted alien forms, each ambassador trying to adapt their unique anatomy to the pose with varying degrees of success and discomfort. Laughter turned to grunts of exertion. The Seraphian tangled its feathers in a knotty pile. A bloop quivered in an almost knot, and Zorblatt froze. The ambassador had pushed his flexible physique too far, and now he found himself unable to unravel. A little help here?" Zorblatt's voice was muffled from within the tangle of his own limbs. The room erupted in a mix of concern and suppressed giggles. Lisa, suppressing her own smile, stepped forward. "Let's unwind this, shall we?" she offered diplomatically, navigating through the maze of Zorblatt's limbs with the yoga instructor's careful precision. As she helped Zorblatt and others disentangle, the mood in the room lightened. What began as a display of cultural superiority subtly shifted towards a shared experience of vulnerability and mutual assistance. "Yoga," Lisa said, once Zorblatt was free and somewhat sheepish, "isn't about showing off. It's about meeting your own edge and learning to listen to your body. It seems we're all more alike than we are different, even if it takes a twist or two to see it." Zorblatt chuckled, rubbing at a sore appendage. "Perhaps there's more to this human yoga than I thought," he admitted. The laughter that followed Zorblatt's reluctant admission filled the grand hall, easing the earlier tension. The sight of various dignified ambassadors, from the nimble Seraphians to the bulky, stoic Zorblatt himself, attempting to extricate themselves from the complex yoga pose, had a humbling effect. It was a moment of shared humility that transcended interstellar boundaries, a realization that physical prowess could be both a strength and an amusing vulnerability. Captain Lisa Nguyen, seeing an opportunity to deepen the camaraderie, suggested a slightly less ambitious pose. "Let's dial it back a notch with the downward-facing dog," she proposed, demonstrating the pose with effortless grace. Her body formed a perfect inverted V, her hands and feet planted firmly on the mat, her back straight and strong. One by one, the ambassadors followed, their attempts varying wildly, but each effort met with cheers and supportive claps. Even Zorblatt, a little more cautious now, managed a decent attempt, his 4 arms surprisingly useful in maintaining stability. As the session progressed, the hall buzzed with light-hearted exchanges. "It appears human yoga is not just about flexibility, but also about finding balance and laughter," mused a Seraphian, its voice a musical trill that resonated softly around the room. "Yes, and a bit of unexpected physical comedy, it seems," Lisa responded with a wink. Her eyes met Zorblatt's, and for a moment there was an unspoken acknowledgement of the earlier mishap, a shared joke that no longer needed words. The yoga session ended on a high note, with ambassadors helping each other fold their mats, a gesture small yet significant, emblematic of the newfound understanding among them. They congregated around refreshment tables, their conversations light and filled with laughter, a stark contrast to the usual formal dialogues that typically characterized these gatherings. Zorblatt, now fully recovered from his entanglement, approached Lisa with a respectful nod. "Captain Nguyen, I must admit there's an art to human yoga that I didn't appreciate until today," he confessed, his tone warm and devoid of earlier skepticism. Lisa smiled, accepting the olive branch. "It's all about perspective, Ambassador. Sometimes you need to turn things upside down to see them right," she quipped, pleased to see a flicker of amusement in Zorblatt's eyes. "But let us not forget the purpose of our gathering," Zorblatt continued, his voice carrying across the nearby clusters of conversing delegates. "While today we share in laughter and light stretches, the goal remains to bridge our worlds through understanding and respect." The room quieted, the mood shifting as the weight of Zorblatt's words settled in. Lisa nodded, stepping beside him, her stature small, yet her presence commanding. "Exactly," she affirmed. "Today, through yoga, we stretched more than our bodies. We expanded our minds to embrace the quirks and qualities of our diverse galaxy." As the ambassadors dispersed, plans for the next day's activities were discussed with a new, eager anticipation. The schedule promised joint scientific presentations and technological exchanges, but now there was an underlying excitement for the shared experiences yet to come. Later, in the quiet of her command office, Lisa reflected on the day's events. The laughter and light-hearted moments had not only provided relief from the usual formalities, but had also opened a pathway to more sincere interactions. She jotted down notes for a closing speech, determined to highlight the importance of humor in diplomacy. After all, if they could laugh together, they could work together. In the hallway outside, Zorblatt paused by a viewport, looking out at the stars. The sight of the vast cosmos, with its infinite mysteries and possibilities, reminded him of the small yet significant steps being taken aboard the Harmony. Today had been about more than yoga. It had been about setting aside differences to find common ground, even if that ground was a yoga mat. As the stars twinkled indifferently back at him, Zorblatt realized that perhaps the humans had something unique after all. Not just their physical flexibility, but their ability to foster unity through joy and shared challenges. After the yoga session, the atmosphere aboard the Harmony remained lighthearted and vibrant. The hall, once a battleground of diplomatic reserve and cultural superiority, had transformed into a space of laughter and mutual respect. The ambassadors, previously cautious and reserved, now mingled with an ease that had been absent at the week's start. Captain Lisa Nguyen watched with satisfaction as groups of diverse beings shared stories and snacks, their languages and laughter mingling in the air. She spotted Zorblatt engaging earnestly with a group of diminutive, energetic Ploxians. His earlier arrogance had softened into a humble curiosity, his posture open, his multiple eyes twinkling with genuine interest. "Seems you've got the hang of this, Zorblatt," Lisa commented as she approached the group. Zorblatt turned, a slight blush coloring his scales. "I must admit, Captain, your human practices are more enlightening than I anticipated." A Ploxian, barely the height of Zorblatt's knee, piped up with a high-pitched giggle. He was quite the star, twisting and turning better than a space worm in a black hole. The group erupted in laughter, Zorblatt's booming chuckle rising above them all. Lisa's eyes crinkled with mirth as she joined in. It was moments like these, unscripted and genuine, that often did more for interstellar relations than formal treaties could ever hope to achieve. "Captain Nguyen," Zorblatt said as the laughter died down, "perhaps tomorrow I could demonstrate a Gliese meditation technique. It's quite stationary compared to human yoga." "I think that would be splendid," Lisa replied, her voice warm. "A cultural exchange goes both ways. We learn from each other, grow together." As the gathering continued, Lisa excused herself to prepare for the following day's activities. Her steps took her past windows that looked out onto the vastness of space, a reminder of the endless possibilities and the many worlds beyond her own. Back in the grand hall, Zorblatt's offer to share a piece of Gliese culture had sparked a new enthusiasm among the delegates. One by one, others began to volunteer aspects of their own heritages for future sessions. The Harmony had become a true melting pot of galactic culture, each ambassador eager to both teach and learn. The evening wound down with a spontaneous session of music, where instruments as varied as the beings who played them filled the room with strange yet harmonious sounds. Even the stoic Eurythians, known for their silence, swayed to the rhythms, their bright eyes softening. "Music does seem to be a universal language," Lisa mused aloud, standing beside Zorblatt, who had remained to listen. "Indeed, Captain. It's much like your yoga. Different forms, same essence," Zorblatt responded, his tone reflective. "Tomorrow's meditation, then. We're all looking forward to it," Lisa said, turning to leave. "Captain," Zorblatt called after her, She paused, looking back. Thank you. For today. It was more impactful than I expected. Lisa smiled, her heart light. Thank you, Ambassador, for being open to it. See you in the morning. As she walked away, Lisa felt a deep satisfaction. The week was only halfway through, but already the bridges being built here stretched far beyond the confines of the ship. In these shared moments of humility and laughter, a new chapter of interstellar diplomacy was being written, one not of treaties and negotiations, but of understanding and respect. The Harmony, aptly named, was living up to its mission, and for Captain Lisa Nguyen, that was more than enough. The last day of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange week dawned with a quiet serenity that seemed to envelop the spaceship Harmony. As ambassadors gathered in the central hall, the air was charged with a palpable sense of anticipation and reflection. Today was not just about sharing another cultural artifact. It was about cementing the bonds that had unexpectedly formed over the week. Captain Lisa Nguyen took her place at the front of the hall, her presence as reassuring and commanding as ever. Good morning, everyone, she began, her voice clear and steady. Today, we close our week not with a goodbye, but with an opening to new beginnings. Zorblatt stepped up beside her, his stature imposing yet softened by the warm smile he offered the assembly. In the spirit of these new beginnings, he announced, I invite you to experience a meditation technique from Gliese, one that teaches us about the tranquility of stillness. As Zorblatt led the group through the meditation, the hall was filled with a deep silence, a stark contrast to the laughter and lively discussions of the previous days. Each ambassador sat in reflective quiet, the peace of the moment knitting them closer together. After the session, as the group slowly came back to the present, Captain Nguyen addressed them again. This week we've twisted our bodies into knots, laughed at our own limitations, and found harmony in the most unexpected places, she said, her gaze sweeping across the faces before her. We've learned that understanding isn't just about speaking, but about listening. Not just about standing out, but about blending in. The ambassadors nodded, their expressions thoughtful, touched by the truth in her words. And perhaps most importantly, Lisa continued, we've seen that humor and humility can bridge gaps we thought were unbridgeable. Zorblatt, now fully at ease, added, Captain Nguyen has shown us that leadership is not just about guiding others, but about being willing to learn from them. For that, we are grateful. The hall erupted into applause, a sound rich with genuine respect and affection. As the clapping subsided, a Eurythian ambassador, known for their reticence, stood. I propose a tradition, they said, their voice surprisingly strong. Let this exchange week be only the first of many. Let us continue to meet, to share, and to grow. Let the Harmony Circle become an annual event. A murmur of agreement swept through the room, and Captain Nguyen's eyes sparkled with unshed tears of joy. The Harmony Circle, she repeated, the name settling around them with a sense of rightness. As the meeting adjourned, the ambassadors mingled, exchanging contact information and promises to visit each other's worlds. The barriers of formality had broken down, replaced by a camaraderie that promised to extend beyond the confines of this spaceship. Captain Nguyen and Zorblatt lingered by the viewport, looking out at the stars. You know, Zorblatt, Lisa said thoughtfully, I think we've started something wonderful here. Zorblatt nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Yes, a circle of harmony, stretching across the galaxies. Who would have thought it all began with a little human yoga? They shared a laugh, the sound mingling with the hum of the ship, as around them, the Harmony prepared to disembark its newly united crew of interstellar ambassadors, each returning to their corner of the cosmos with stories of yoga, laughter, and an unexpected friendship that had changed them all. As the final event of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange week, Captain Lisa Nguyen announced a special session, a zero-gravity meditation led by the Ploxians, masters of the art. The participants gathered in Harmony's zero-G chamber, a room specially designed to simulate the weightlessness of deep space. Let's float into tranquility, chirped Gliese, a sprightly Ploxian instructor, as he adjusted the settings to reduce the gravity. The room's artificial gravity slowly faded, eliciting gasps and giggles as ambassadors began to lift off the ground, their bodies drifting gently. "Relax and embrace the void," Gliese floated by, guiding a bewildered Zorblatt, who spun slightly with his limbs extended. "Like this, Ambassador?" Zorblatt asked, trying to mimic Gliese's serene pose, but rotating slowly instead. "Almost. Try to feel the stillness. Not just make it," Gliese advised, gently correcting Zorblatt's posture.